the #2 player in all of the country per 24/7 Sports, Dylan Raiola. He's been committed to Georgia for a long time. And Kirby Smart, Steve Wilfong, our director of recruiting, he is crystal balled the #1 quarterback in the country to Lincoln, Nebraska. Matt Rhule. Drew, right now, Matt Rhule and the Nebraska Cornhuskers are trending not only for Dylan Raiola, but a former 5-star as well, and Kyle McCord from the Ohio State Buckeyes. A lot to unpack here. Drew, your thoughts if Nebraska ends up landing Dylan Raiola?
Well, Cooper, didn't you tell me, I don't know, 6 months ago that Dylan Raiola is going to play a snap for the Cornhuskers at some point? I don't think you thought it would be potentially in 2024, but this is a big news. This is huge. And I was on CBS Sports HQ, and I brought up the fact that, yeah, Nebraska needs to improve the passing game. It was one of the worst, not only at the Power 5 level, but also at the FBS level, 129th in passing here in 2023. And Dylan Raiola, if they were able to get him, you would have to be excited about the direction Matt Rhule has the program headed. Look, when he took over, we said this wasn't going to be a 1 or 2 year rebuild. This was going to be a 4, 5, 6 rebuild. And to me, if they're able to get Dylan Raiola pull off that flip, and it sounds like it's heading in that direction, a few reports out there that he's going to spend this upcoming weekend in Lincoln on an official visit, I think this is a battle cry for the Nebraska fan base. You want to talk about NIL support. You get a legacy prospect, one of the best passers in the 2024 cycle, not only the 2024 cycle, one of the best passers in recent years signed. I think that a lot of people are going to buy into Nebraska football. So I'm interested to see what happens here. You mentioned Kyle McCord as well. I think that gives them a intermediate quarterback, and then the long-term plan in Dylan Raiola. And when I look at Nebraska, that's my question mark. What happens under center moving forward?
Georgia is still fighting here as Kirby Smart leading the charge to keep Dylan Raiola in the boat. Why wouldn't they? Georgia, 2-quarterback class. Ryan Puglisi also in the top 247, notable for Georgia. Drew, there's been some reports about Carson Beck. This is what has really supposedly impacted Dylan Raiola in terms of the 11th hour potential flip to Nebraska, that Carson Beck coming back for another year. Dylan Raiola would have to sit a year in Athens, but it looks like it's going to be that way in Lincoln as well if Nebraska can land Kyle McCord. Pretty interesting. The other thing to think about here, if you're wondering how Nebraska is firmly in the mix, if you've been living under a rock, Dylan Raiola's father was an All-American at Nebraska, also played 10 years in the NFL for the Detroit Lions, very respected player, and then also Dylan's uncle is on staff as the offensive line coach, just signed an extension as well. Drew, on the flip side of this, if Dylan Raiola does indeed sign with Nebraska, what's your purview for Georgia fans out there who just 8 days away thought that they were going to end up with the #1 arm in the country?
I think there's no reason to panic. I mean, if we're being completely honest, Cooper, I don't know if I said it on this podcast, maybe it was the Cover 3. I don't think the gap between Raiola, I keep doing this, Raiola and Puglisi is all that big. I think it actually shrunk here in the senior seasons. And Raiola threw 250 passes as a senior at Buford and tossed just 1 interception. So that's saying a lot about what I think about Puglisi. There's just something about him when you watch him play, specifically as a senior. Doesn't get enough credit for the runner he is. He's got a live arm, baseball background. I think the biggest thing for Puglisi, and he has a ton of supporters behind the scenes there in Athens. Cooper, I know you talk to some of the same people as me. I mean, they have been pushing Pugga for a few months now, but I think becoming more of a touch passer, but you can see it in the senior tape, just his ability to distribute the football and then also run the football. So I don't think Georgia fans should panic. We'll see what they do in the 2025 cycle. Let's assuming Raiola were to leave and they ended up with Puglisi, Julian Lewis, the #1 ranked recruit in the class of 2026. He's talked about reclassifying. He's been a regular in Athens as well. I'm not concerned about the long-term outlook under center for Georgia if Dylan Raiola were to end up at Nebraska.
We talked about it, I think, a week or two ago, Matt Rhule on this show talking about, hey, the cost of a college football starter, 5-star type of talent now, it's about $1 to $2 million, right? So I think that was probably a little bit of a precursor, what you're seeing play out now. Drew, the other thing I want to hit on, how fired up does it get you that Dylan Raiola could potentially be throwing the football to the likes of guys like Malachi Coleman and Carter Nelson?
Yeah, I mean, I get excited. I mean, we said it, right? Matt Rule, when he took over in Nebraska, he's going to recruit a ton of different traits, and it might not be the highest ranked individuals, but these are guys that have NFL tools. And we saw that in his stops at Temple and at Baylor. But it wasn't going to be a 1 or 2 year thing. It was going to be a bit of a longer burn. And Malachi Coleman, you mentioned him, a guy on my freaks list in the 2023 cycle. We had him, as a freshman of the week at some point there back in October when he caught that touchdown against Northwestern. I feel good about the direction the roster would be headed. And I think for Matt Rule heading into year 2 after a disappointing year 1, to get what would be the highest ranked signee in the modern recruiting era for the Nebraska, that's going to, ease everyone a little bit and not buy him time, but get everyone on board. So yeah, I'd be fired up about those two freaks if I was Dylan Raiola. I mean, some guys to throw to in Carter Nelson and Malachi Coleman.
Foundational piece for Nebraska. The Cornhuskers right now, they rank number 22 per 24/7 Sports in the composite team rankings. With the addition of 5-star Dylan Raiola, if that does happen, they would move up into the top 20 at the number 19 spot. The Dylan Raiola sweepstakes, we will be following that closely. Our director of recruiting, Steve Wilfong, will have everything you need to know there in 24/7 Sports. In general, your home for everything recruiting, transfer portal as well.